Amrod,
Yes.
shall we start the class?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I think my PPT is visible.
Yeah, visible.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, students.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Two responses. Thank you. And I think after a gap of few days, I think I'm meeting again. And today and one more day, we have some deliberations on the remaining units of the research methodology area. Okay. And today, I would like to concentrate on units 9.5, 9.6, which mostly talk about the statistical tools and techniques, and 9.10, which talks about the latest trends in library and information science research. Okay, fine. So let me get into the presentation. Unit 9.5, it talks about data analysis and interpretation, presentation of data, statistical methods and techniques. Okay, fine. See, any kind of research, whenever you are in the process of collecting data, you might have collected the data either with the help of observation or schedule or interview or questionnaire or any kind of projective techniques what we discussed in the previous classes. You have got some data with you. So this data is going to be analyzed. This data is going to be organized. This data is going to be presented. And this data is going to be interpreted. See, these are the four different stages involved in analyzing the data and get valid inferences for your research work. Okay, so let's begin with the data analysis. Okay, data collection is over. We talk about data analysis. So what is analysis? In general, the term analysis means when a whole, a complete thing is given to you, you are going to divide it, you are going to separate it into its constituent parts. What are the different parts? What different components are available for this particular single piece? Okay, a single, for example, you got a chapati, a whole chapati. So this chapati you divide into various components depending on your nature, depending on your interest, depending on your capability, depending on your requirement. The same way, once you have collected a good amount of data, this data will be divided, categorized, classified into required convenient compartments. So how do we categorize this data into various categories or various classifications? So that should be based on the specific questions that you have framed for your research work under the statement of the problem. Okay, so when you are talking about statement of the problem, you might have decided what are the various questions I would like to answer or my research is trying to answer. So based on those specific questions, your data is to be categorized, should be consolidated, should be classified, should be tabulated. So that process is called as analysis. Okay. And mostly for the purpose of data analysis, we can say that we have qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. Fine. And the qualitative analysis is not based on precise measurement. We cannot say that a particular person's beauty is 14.73 degrees Celsius. No, we cannot say so. Exactly, we cannot say. So wherever it is not possible for you to refer to some variables in exact precise manner using numericals, you can go for qualitative analysis. For example, we talk about social demographic features of the respondents. We arrange the respondents based on biggest to smallest classes, or we arrange the variables, the frequencies from most important to least important, or we are ranking the children based on their color. So these are a few examples for qualitative analysis, the analysis which does not involve precise measurements. Fine. Then comes quantitative analysis. See, whenever you are assigning some kind of numerical value to any of your questions in the questionnaire or data, all those numerical data can be subjected to quantitative analysis. See, the quantitative analysis may range from either a simple frequency. You can form a simple frequency. How many are aged before 10 years, 10 to 15 years, 15 years to 20 years, a simple frequency. Or you can make use of all events to be placed under descriptive statistics. So under descriptive statistics, you talk about mean, median, mode, summary, minimum, maximum, all those things are discussed in descriptive statistics. Then even if you want further, you can go further and conduct various statistical tests called correlation test and all kinds of hypothesis testing weightings that you can do. So the analysis can be either quantitative or qualitative. Fine. And both for quantitative and qualitative analysis, we are making use of statistical tools. We are making use of statistical methods. See, what is the purpose of using all these statistical tools and methods? It's very simple. See, we have got some data and we want to critically examine this data. So whatever data you have grouped, you have collected, you have entered, you want to critically and carefully examine the data. To critically examine, to critically analyze the data, you need statistical tools. You can ask a question, sir, why should we go for a critical examination of the data assembled, data grouped, data collected? Mainly for two purposes. Okay. One is, the first purpose is, we would like to study the characteristics of the object. So whatever object you are studying, maybe a group of UG students or PG students or a set of libraries. So you want to study a particular object. So you want to understand the characteristics of that particular objects under study. That's the first thing. And secondly, there may be a lot of variables that may be related to the object you are studying. So when you're studying PG students, lot of variables like their age, their nativity, computer expertise. So many variables may be there. So you are trying to establish how these variables are related to each other. So for the purpose of understanding the characteristics and for the purpose of understanding the relationship that may exist among the variables, you are making use of all kinds of statistical tools and methods on the data you have collected. Fine. Okay. And what are different types of statistical measures? So we have measures of central tendency. We have measures of dispersion. We have measures of association or relation. We have analysis of variance. And we have time series analysis. So many more are there. Maybe due to paucity of time, I'm not going to discuss about all other statistical tools except those which are listed in the present screen. Okay, fine. Let us see them one by one. Measures of central tendency. So whenever you want to summarize the data, if somebody is asking you, what is the pass percentage of this particular school in 10th standard? Only one answer, 79.84%. That one figure will tell you what is the performance of that particular school in 10th standard. So that kind of statistics that gives you a summary answer is called as measures of central tendency. So normally, we have three different measures. One is mean, median, and the other one is mode. What is mean, which is also called as arithmetic mean or average? It's very simple. You find out the total of all observations and you divide by number of observations, you get mean. Okay, for example, you take the month of September 2020. How many books were issued divided by how many students have visited the library, or how many are the users of the library. So you will get average book issues for the month of September. Okay, that is mean. Then comes median. So median tells you what is the middlemost observation in the series. So that median helps you to divide your data into two halves. Left side, right side, you can have equal number of frequencies lying on both the sides of median. So median gives you the middlemost observation. Then comes mode. Mode talks about the item which occurs most, which is having the highest frequency. That is called mode. For example, 100 students are there. You're asking them a question. Okay. How satisfied you are with the library? Okay. You're asking a question. Some 10 students are raising hands. Then you're asking how well satisfied you are with the library. Some 70 students are raising. How many of you are not satisfied with the library? Again, 10 are raising hands. So what is the mode? 80%, they say that they are well satisfy the library. That is a mode. So mode is the most frequently occurring point in your data set. Please understand. So these measures of central tendency can be and should be used based on the type of data. See, if your data is something like nominal data, you can go for mode. Okay, whether males are more or females are more, you can go for nominal data. If your data is ordinal, ranked data, you can go for median. Okay. Then if your data is something like numerical in number, then you can go for mean as a measure of central tendency. Okay, fine. Then measures of dispersion. See, dispersion always tells you to what extent your data is varying among themselves. Okay. See, many a time we don't have homogeneity of data. We have heterogeneity of data. So what is heterogeneity? So when you see, for example, you go to a class and collect the data on the heights of students. Okay. For example, you are getting an answer from 10 students. For example, the height goes like this: 170, 171, 172, 169, 170, 171. That means there is no much variability in the data. The data is not so much heterogeneous. On the other side, you go to a class, you check their IQ level of students. So IQ level of 10 students, it starts from 24, 37, 46, 80, 85, 90, 120, 130. So here you can see there is a lot of variability in the data. The data is heterogeneous. To measure this dispersion, we have different measures. For example, range. The range tells you the difference between the highest and the lowest observations. One child is having 100 as IQ score, other child is having a 20. So the difference between the highest and lowest score is called range. Then comes the variance. So variance is equal to sum of square divided by n minus 1. So that is a formula. So you can ask me what is a variance. It's very simple. For example, you have collected IQ level of 10 students. Okay, you list all the 10 observations. You find out the mean of these 10 observations and you find out the deviation or deviance. What is deviance? From the mean, you minus each and every observation. The answer you get may be either minus or plus. That is called deviance. The deviance may be squared so that you will not be getting 0. If you don't square it, no. If you total all the deviance, you will get 0. In order to avoid that effect, you are multiplying it, you are squaring it, and you total all the deviance. The total deviance of the data set is called sum of square. Okay, sum of square divided by number of observation minus 1 will give you the average deviance of your data set. Okay, that is called variance. And if you are finding out the positive square root of the variance, that is called standard deviation. Okay, please understand. Standard deviation, if you square standard deviation, you get variance. If you find out the square root of variance, you'll get standard deviation. So both are interrelated to each other. Fine. See, standard deviation is a very, very simple measure. For example, if you say that the standard deviation of a particular sample data is 10, for example, the marks, you have collected marks of some 100 students, okay? And you say that the standard deviation is 10. It means that approximately 60% of the students of your sample, they have got either 50 or 70. So their mean will be ranging, their mark score will be ranging from 50 to 70. That is, mean is 60. Standard deviation is 10 means less than 10, less than 60, or 10 more than 60. That is 50 to 70 will be the mark scored by 60% of the sample. So that is what standard deviation is all about. Okay. Then comes coefficient of variation. If you're having two different environment, village A and village B, if you want to find out the variation of data between these two cities, these two villages, these two situations, you can go for coefficient of variation, which is calculated based on the standard deviation of that particular area. Fine. Then correlation. See, when you are having two numerical data, and if you want to find out whether is there any linear relationship existing between the variables, then you can go for correlation measures. Okay. So what are the conditions? You should have two numbers. Okay, then you can go for correlation. For example, the monthly income of 100 people and monthly savings 100 people. So you can find out whether is there any correlation between these two variables. Both are numbers, and correlation studies only the linear relationship. Please understand, in statistics you have got many different kinds of relationship: linear, curvilinear, log linear, many relationships are there. But correlation studies only the linear relationship. So what is a linear relationship? When one variable is increasing, the other variable will also increase. One variable decreases, the other variable also decreases. When one variable is increasing, the other variable may be decreasing. So this is what the linear relationship is all about. Okay. And here we have positive correlation and negative correlation. When you talk about positive correlation, here when one variable is increasing in score, the other variable also will increase in its score. Okay. For example, amount of salary and amount of spending. So normally when people get more salary, the spending will be more in numbers. When your height is increasing, your food size also will increase. They're positive correlation. Okay. What about negative correlation? When one variable is increasing, the other variable is decreasing. For example, you filled your petrol tank in the car. Okay. Maybe you may have some 100 liters of petrol. When you start traveling, you are trying to reach a particular place, the number of kilometers you travel will keep on increasing, and the quantum of petrol what you have in a petrol tank keeps on decreasing. This is an example for negative correlation. Okay. So in order to illustrate diagrammatically the correlation between two variables, we can make use of something called scatter plot or scattergram. Okay. Now apart from this correlation, so they are called as bivariate correlation. What is bivariate? Two variables are taken into consideration. We are studying the relationship between those two numerical values. At the same time, we have something called partial correlation. This is called partial correlation. For example, you are studying the relationship between monthly income and monthly savings. Fine. But please understand, the amount of savings of an individual may depend on some other factors also. Maybe one example, maybe extra income. So he is having 2 or 3 houses. He has given it for rent, and he is having some, apart from his monthly salary, he is getting some rent from his houses. Or there is no much medical expenditure from his family, or family size. Okay, these are many other factors that may also influence the correlation between amount of salary and amount of savings. In partial correlation, what you can do is that you can study the relation between salary and savings by controlling, by keeping aside, by throwing off the impact of other factors. You can control other factors. By controlling other factors, you can find out the relationship between two variables. So that kind of correlation is called as partial correlation. Okay, fine. Then comes a regression. So regression is an extended form of correlation. Okay. So if you feel that two variables are related to each other in a linear fashion, for example, number of hours a child spends in studying and the marks he scores in the examination. So these two are correlated. So you are confirming that there is a correlation between these two variables. If correlation is there, then you can go to next step. What is the next step? You will try to find out how reliably your independent variable will be predicting the dependent variable. Okay. So if you are knowing the independent variables, you will be able to predict the dependent variable. See, after studying the data, if somebody is telling you, my son is studying for 10 hours, then using regression, you'll be able to tell the particular parent how many marks he may score in the examination. You can predict the dependent variable, that is marks scored by the students. Okay. So that kind of prediction is done in regression. Okay. So we have linear regression where you get a linear equation. For example, y is equal to a plus bx. In this equation, y is equal to, see, y is equal to dependent variable which you would like to predict. Okay, you want to predict how many marks a child will score. That is y. Y is equal to, the a is called intercept, that is constant. Okay, when you do this regression analysis, any software, they give you a intercept, there's a constant value which will not vary. So you write the constant value plus beta of independent variable. So whatever may be the independent variable, you multiply beta value. Okay, that will be equal to the dependent variable. So that kind of effect of independent variable on predicting the dependent variable is done in the case of regression, linear regression. In the linear regression, we have one independent variable and one dependent variable. See, number of hours spent and mark scored. Number of hours spent is the independent variable. Mark scored is dependent variable. So one independent variable, one dependent variable. We have linear, simple linear regression. When you go to multiple regression, here we don't use one independent variable. We use more than one independent variable. For example, number of hours a student studies, whether he is going to tuition or not, whether parents are helping or not. So we have taken now three factors, three independent variables. Okay, number of hours, tuition or not, parents help. So we are studying how effectively these three independent variables will be predicting the score of the child. So that is called multiple regression. You can find out what is the contribution of each and every independent variable and what is the contribution of all the independent variables taken together. Both can be studied in multiple regression. Fine. So both linear regression, simple linear regression and multiple linear regression are conducted on numerical data. Okay, we don't conduct simple linear regression and multiple linear regression on categorical data, qualitative data, ordinal data, nominal data. We don't conduct. Okay, if you want to conduct a regression analysis for categorical variable, that means your dependent variable is categorical. Categorical means is a qualitative data. For example, highly satisfied, that kind of data, strongly agree or least agree, that kind of data, or I agree, don't agree, something like that, most frequently, less frequently, that kind of all those data are categorical data. So when your dependent variable is categorical and independent variable is either categorical or numerical, no problem. In that case, you can conduct logistic regression. So please understand the logic behind these regression issues. Okay, fine. Then chi-square, it's a very popular test, chi-square test. See, whenever you want to find out the association between two variables, okay, so these two variables can be either two ordinal variables or one ordinal and one nominal variable. See, for example, you take one nominal variable called gender. Gender is a nominal variable, categorical variable. Okay, boy, girl, two variables are there. Okay, this is called a nominal variable. There is another nominal variable, whether your blood group is A positive or B positive or O negative. That is a blood group. So this is a blood group is also a nominal variable. It is not the ordered, it is nominal variable. So if you want to find out whether is there any association between gender of the respondents and their blood group, you can conduct chi-square test. Fine. In the same way, if you want to conduct a statistical test on the association between gender of the respondents and their level of satisfaction, highly satisfied to least satisfied, one nominal, one ordinal data. So when you want to check the association between these ordinal and nominal data, you can conduct chi-square test. Okay. Normally in chi-square test, we prepare cross tabulation, either 2 into 2, that is independent variable, one variable will have two levels, other variable also having two levels, gender, two levels, boys and girls, and the computer knowledge is there, is not there, two levels. So either 2 into 2 or 2 into 3 or 3 into 3 or 3 into 2, 3 into 4. So any kind of cross tabulations are possible in chi-square. Fine. In chi-square, what we normally do is that, See, whatever data we have collected, that is called observed data. Okay, we have collected data is called observed data. And this observed data is compared with the expected data. Okay, fine, very clear. So what is expected data? So expected data means if there is no association between two variables, both the boys and girls will have the same reply. Okay. If you ask the people how many liters of water you drink during summer, you ask boys, you ask girls. If you feel that there is no association between boys and girls, then both boys and girls will drink equal liters of water. So that is what expected data. So this expected data is compared with the observed data or collected data. And that is how you try to see whether there is any relationship between one variable and the other variable. Fine, good. And what is second purpose of chi-square? Using chi-square, you can find out whether there is a goodness of fit, whether the results whatever you have is matching with the predicted pattern. So that you can try. For example, don't mistake me for this example. So if you go to any foreign country, especially Arab countries or any European countries, if you there's a theory, for example, there's a theory that if you see how many Indians are there in the whole foreign countries, there's a theory which says that, an imaginary theory, okay, which says that 40% of Indian population are from Kerala, okay, remaining 40% are from remaining South India and Central India, 20% are from remaining part of India. So there is a theory like this. Now what you do, you go to a foreign country, you meet some 500 Indians, you ask them which state you belong to. Okay, you have collected data. Now you want to match this theory. What is theory? 40 into 40 into 20. 40 Keralites, 40 from South and Middle India, and 20 from remaining parts of India. Whether this pattern, whatever you have, is matching with your data. You are checking. Okay, so that is called goodness of fit. Okay, so chi-square can be used for both these purposes. Please understand these two things. Good. Then comes factor analysis. So very simple. So factor analysis helps you to summarize, okay, to reduce the dimensions of the data you collected. For example, you prepared some 30 or 40 statements on job satisfaction of the librarians, for example. So all these 40 statements can be conveniently grouped under 6 or 7 or 8 categories, okay, which is called as a factor. Okay, so that kind of understanding of a group of statements that will explain one particular phenomena, one particular concept is called as factor analysis. Okay, fine. So in factor analysis, we are going to have many statements that will be combinedly will be representing a particular factor. After that, you can give a name for each and every factor, and every factor may have 4 statements, 10 statements, 6 statements. That all depends on the kind of intercorrelations that exist between the statements. Okay, so factor analysis works based on the intercorrelation that exists between the statements. Fine. And when you talk about factor analysis, we have 2 different methods. One is confirmatory factor analysis. The other is exploratory factor analysis. Okay. For example, you don't have any idea about information literacy skills of respondents. You don't know what are the factors, what are the major categories of information literacy skills. You don't have any idea. Okay. What you've done is that simply you have prepared some 40 statements on information literacy skills of students. Fine. Now you subject all these 40 statements into exploratory factor analysis. At the end of the exploratory factor analysis, you will understand how many factors are there and how many statements are to be written under every factor. So the system will tell you that these many factors are there. You put these many statements in first factor, these many statements in second factor. So that tells you based on the loading. Fine. That is called exploratory factor analysis, which you can very well do in SPSS. Fine, no problem. And there is something called confirmatory factor analysis, wherein you are having a theory. For example, there is something called Sconal 7 pillars model of information literacy. So already the Sconal group has decided and devised that there are 7 factors, there are 7 groups of variables as far as information literacy is concerned, starting from recognize, search, evaluate, use, like that 7 pillars are there. Now you know that there are 7 pillars. So now you collect data from some 200, 300 students. In the factor analysis, you are confirming whether the data what you have collected also are resulting into same 7 categories or not. That is called confirmatory factor analysis. In SPSS, you cannot do confirmatory factor analysis. You need another software called AMOS. You might have heard about AMOS, A-M-O-S. Using AMOS, structured equation modeling. They say SEM, no? S-E-M. Using SEM, you can conduct this confirmatory factor analysis. Okay, fine. And when you want to conduct exploratory factor analysis, a good number of methods are available, but a very popular method is principal component analysis. Okay, fine. Then comes one-way ANOVA and two-way ANOVA. So please understand, see, ANOVA test is conducted whenever you want to compare more than 2 means, 3 means or more than 3 means. For example, you have 3 groups of students, UG students, PG students, and research scholars. Okay, and you go and find out what is the amount they spend in a month. Okay, you find out the mean score of UG students, mean score of PG students, mean score of research scholars. Now you do one-way ANOVA or ANOVA for that matter to find out whether is there any significant difference among these 3 group of students in terms of amount they spend in a month. So that is called the ANOVA. Okay. When you talk about one-way ANOVA, we take only one independent variable, we take only one dependent variable, and we try to understand whether is there any significant difference among these independent variable and dependent variable. For example, what is the independent variable? The qualification of the student, UG, PG, research scholar. But this particular independent variable is having 3 levels. Only one independent variable. What is the name of the independent variable? Educational qualification, or what they studied now. This independent variable is having 3 levels: UG, PG, research scholar. So whenever your independent variable is having 3 or more than 3 levels, you can go for ANOVA. Here, one independent variable called education qualification. There is another dependent variable called the amount they spend in a month. So when you want to find out whether is there any significant difference between UG, PG and research scholars and the amount they spend in a month, you can go for one-way ANOVA. Here one independent variable and one dependent variable is involved. Suppose you are having 2 independent variables. So one is education qualification, okay, and second is their parental income. Okay, so you're taking into consideration the parental income of the respondents. You want to see whether is there any impact of education qualification on the amount spent. Is there any impact of parental income on the amount spent? Or is there any combined effect of education qualification and parental income of the respondents on the amount spent? So when you want to do that kind of analysis, you can go for two-way ANOVA. Okay, you can go for two-way ANOVA. In two-way ANOVA, we are having 2 independent variables and their individual and the combined effect is studied on a single dependent variable. Okay, that is called a two-way ANOVA. It is very clear to you. And another major difference is that in one-way ANOVA, we are comparing, as I told you, one independent variable having 3 or more categorical groups. In two-way ANOVA, we are comparing multiple groups, because in two-way ANOVA, we have got one independent variable, then another independent variable. One independent variable may be having 3 or more than 3 categories. Another independent variable may be having 3 or 4 categories. So here multiple groups are compared in the case of two-way ANOVA. Fine. I think you remember when I was discussing about experimental designs, I told you that Fisher, the person who propounded experimental method, he narrated 3 different methods tools for experimental designs. Principle of replication, principle of randomization, and principle of local control. I think you remember. In the case of one-way ANOVA, principle of replication and principle of randomization both are used. But in the case of two-way ANOVA, we are using all the three principles: principle of replication, principle of randomization, and principle of local control. So these are the differences between one-way ANOVA and two-way ANOVA. Basically, ANOVA is meant for checking whether is there any difference among the independent variable and dependent variables in terms of their variance. Okay, fine. Then comes multivariate analysis. See, so far we were discussing about effect of one or two independent variables on a single dependent variable. But in the case of multivariate analysis, we are studying the impact of independent variables on more than one dependent variable. Okay, if number of dependent variables may be one, number of independent variables can be either one or two. Fine. In the case of MANOVA, multivariate analysis of variance, we have one-way ANOVA and two-way ANOVA. In one-way MANOVA, we have one independent variable and we are having two dependent variables. For example, there is an independent variable called number of hours, lecture hours a particular person attends. So we have 4 different groups of students. One group is having 30 minutes class every day. The other group is attending class for 60 minutes. Third group is attending classes for 90 minutes a day. And the fourth group is attending classes for 120 minutes a day. Fine. This is an independent variable called lecture duration. This independent variable, single variable, is having 4 levels. What are the levels? 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes. Okay. One independent variable is there. Now we want to find out the effect of lecture duration on 2 dependent variables. What are they? Short-term memory recall, long-term memory recall. Okay. Effect of one independent variable on 2 dependent variables. That is called one-way MANOVA. Fine. In the case of two-way MANOVA, you are studying the effect of 2 independent variables on 2 dependent variables. So you are increasing the number of independent variables to 2. Lecture duration is one thing, and hours of revision time. You can take 2 variables, 2 independent variables on 2 dependent variables: short-term memory recall and long-term memory recall. Then that becomes two-way MANOVA. Got it? Clear? So when you talk about multivariate analysis, we are talking about the impact of independent variables on more than one dependent variable. So that is called multivariate analysis. Okay. In SPS, you can do this MANOVA. Then comes covariance. See, variance is sum of square divided by n minus 1. No? Variance. So variance tells you how much a particular variable is varying. A single variable, to what extent it varies. When you talk about covariance, we are telling how 2 variables vary together. If you take 2 variables, same example, income and expenditure, income and savings, how these 2 variables varying together. They vary together in a particular situation. If we have a large covariance, it means that these 2 variables are having a strong relationship between them. Fine. So that kind of analysis is called as covariance. In SPSS, you can have something like ANCOVA, analysis of covariance, where you can ask a question. So basically, there's a difference between ANOVA and ANCOVA. In ANOVA, we are just trying to find out whether is there any difference among 3 different groups of people. Okay, urban people, village people, and semi-urban people. 3 groups of people are there, for example. If you want to find out is there any difference among these 3 groups of people, you can go for ANOVA, no problem. But if you want to apply the principle of local control, that is, you want to control the effect of other variables. For example, you want to study the impact of drug, a specific new drug, a new medicine, on the depression level of people. Okay, and you're having three treatment groups, maybe small children, adults, and aged. 3 different groups are there, and 1 control group is there. You know, control group is a group where we are not doing any kind of experiment. Fine. The treatment group, you are trying to find out, you are giving all the 3 different groups of people, young, small children, and adults, and aged people. You give a new drug and you find out whether is there any effect of this new drug on these 3 different groups of the individual. But please understand, the effect of the new drug may be based on, maybe depending on other factors also, like family life, job status, drug use, other drugs, whatever they use, medicines and all. No? So here in ANCOVA, you can control the effects of other variables, and you can check the effect of only 2 variables whether they are varying together or not. So that kind of comparison of 2 variables, whether they vary together or not, can be found out using covariance. Okay, fine. The last one is time series analysis. See, whenever you talk about regression, in your regression, if your dependent variable and independent, 2 things are there. If your independent variable is time, then that is called time series. For example, you take the stock of your library from 1999 to 2020. Every year, how many books were purchased? Or every year, how many books were issued? Every year, how many students visited the library? So whenever your independent variable becomes a year or a month or day, that is called time series analysis. Okay. And you have 4 different types of or components of time series analysis. One is secular trend. See, for example, if you take a data, that data may have fluctuations, high fluctuations or low fluctuations, increases, decreases over a period of time. If you take 20 years data, you can see a lot of difference in number of books issued from your library. So that kind of changes that take place over a period of time, that is called a secular trend. Okay, fine. Then seasonal variation. For example, if you take the month of winter season, no, in the case of winter season, tea sales and hot drink sales will be more. In the case of summer, coconut, tender coconuts or cool drinks will be sold more. So that kind of seasonal variations may be there. If you take a library, maybe if you take an academic year, in the beginning of the academic year, less number of books are normally issued. Just now, students have started coming to the college. In the middle of the academic year, children take a lot of books for their class preparation, assignment, seminar, internal examination, external examination. They take a lot of books. At the end of the year, the number of books being issued will be coming down. It is called a seasonal variation. The variation that takes place within 1 year, that is called seasonal variation. Then called cyclical variation, say especially in business or in economy of any country. Always we have some flourishing period like prosperity. The same time we have down period like depression. So in the time of prosperity, everything will go up. At the time of depression like this corona period, everything will go down. That is called cyclical variation. Especially in Indian industries and economics, we talk about this particular concept. Then come irregular variation. So the variation in the data which cannot be predicted. You cannot predict because the variation has come down or it has gone up because of some unexpected events, maybe communal riots, natural calamities like corona. No? So nobody thought that the quantum of mask production, the quantum of oxygen production will go to this extent. Okay, that is called irregular variation. Fine. Except this irregular variation, other 3 variations, secular trends, seasonal variations, and cyclical variations can be somehow calculated. You got some methods for that. To determine the secular trends, we have moving average method. We have method of least squares. See, especially those who are doing research in scientometric output, no, bibliometric studies and all, no. So they employ this method of least squares to predict the future research productivity of an individual or a country or an institution or a subject. They use that. Then methods for measuring seasonal variations. We have ratio to trend method. We have ratio to moving average method and link relative method. Then when you want to measure cyclical fluctuations, we have harmonic analysis, spectrum analysis. I'm sorry, I don't have much idea about all these methods except method of least squares, what we use in our scientometric studies. Okay, fine. Then comes the statistical test can be conveniently classified into parametric test and non-parametric test. Please understand. So what are parametric tests? Parametric tests are powerful tests. When you can conduct parametric tests? When two conditions are fulfilled. Okay, what are two conditions? First condition, you should have numerical data. Your data should be in numbers, 100, 200, 1 for numbers. Second condition, your data should be normally distributed. Your data should be normally distributed. If these two conditions are fulfilled, then you can go and conduct parametric test for your data. Okay, you can ask a question, sir, how can I test the normality of the data? It's very simple. Either you can make use of a histogram, or you take the help of kurtosis and skewness, or you can conduct a statistical test called one sample KS test. So they will tell you whether data is normal or not. So data is normal and you're having numeric data. That is, you're having interval data or ratio data. So in that case, you can conduct parametric tests. So what are the parametric tests? One sample t-test, independent sample t-test, paired sample t-test. So t-test is used to check the means of two groups. Okay. For example, gender is one independent variable. It is having two levels, two groups, boys and girls. You can go for independent sample test. Whether is there any mean difference between boys marks and girls marks, independent sample test. Paired sample t-test, two groups, before and after, before corona, after corona, before online introduction, after online introduction, before and after treatments can be done in paired sample t-test. One way ANOVA, two way ANOVA, I told you. Repeated measures ANOVA. So ANOVA can be repeated, as I told you, before and after, repeated measures ANOVA. Then comes Pearson coefficient of correlation. I told you about correlation. If your data is normal, if you're having numeric data, you can make use of Pearson coefficient of correlation. These are all the parametric tests. Then comes non-parametric tests. So they are called distribution free tests. See, you are having a nominal data, or you are having the ordinal data, or though you are having a numerical data, the data is not normally distributed. In that case, you can go for non-parametric tests. Okay. See, Mann-Whitney U test in the place of independent sample t-test. Kruskal-Wallis test in the place of one-way ANOVA. Wilcoxon matched pair test in the case of paired sample t-test. Okay. These are the equivalents. Then high-score test I told you between ordinal and nominal data. Then Spearman rank correlation. See, when you want to, see, for example, you are given 5 library services, you are asking students to rank them. Which service you will give first rank? Which service will give second rank? Ranking. For such kind of rankings, you can use Spearman rank correlation. Fine. And there is something called Kendall-Taubes correlation. See, when you are asking the people to rank, when you are having lot of tied ranks, see, large number of people are given same rank to some product. Some tied ranks are there. In that case, instead of using Spearman rank correlation, you can make use of Kendall-Taubes correlation. Okay, they are all non-parametric tests. Okay, fine. Okay, so why do we analyze data using all these statistical tests? Because we want to condense. We have collected large amount of data. We want to reduce the large amount of data into some meaningful information. That is the purpose of data analysis. In data analysis, there is something called coding. What is coding? Whatever response you receive from the respondents, those responses are converted into set of numbers. So you might have heard about tally numbers, no? All those things were used for these coding purpose. And there is a process called data cleaning, wherein we are trying to find out what kind of errors are there in the data collection, the data, how to correct that errors. Okay, that process called as data cleaning. When you talk about statistical analysis, we have two different types. One is descriptive, the other is inferential statistics. Okay. So descriptive statistics means we are just describing whatever amount of data you collected in the form of summary statistics. Mean, median, mode, range, standard deviation, interquartile range, all those things are descriptive analysis. Even the all charts, whatever diagrams you have, everything descriptive statistics. What about inferential statistics? Please understand. Inferential statistics is used for hypothesis testing. That is, you are collecting data from some 100 UG students. You are analyzing it. You get the inference. Then you are trying to apply these findings to the entire population of students. Okay. Inference of the sample is applied to the population. All those statistical tools that are useful for this kind of inference drawing is called as inferential statistics. So whatever parametric, whatever non-parametric tools I was talking about now, all those things are called as inferential statistics. Okay, fine. Then presentation, so data is analyzed. What is the next step? Data is to be presented. What do you mean by presenting the data? Whatever data you have, the data should be formed into meaningful categories and classifications, logical classifications, sequential classifications. See, normally we have 3 different methods of presenting our data. After doing all the analysis, we are going to present our data. How to analyze? In the form of textual. So using text, you can present your data. Using tabular form, you can present your data. And using charts or diagrams or pictures, you can present your data. Okay. What is a textual presentation? Say, for example, after collecting data, you give a long paragraph. Okay, I collected data from 100 students. After 100 students, 10 are males, 90 are females. They're all visiting college library every day. So you are just explaining in text, in words. That is called textual presentation of your data. See, sometimes people may not have time to read the entire text, especially when large amount of data is there. You need more and more paragraphs. So what do? You need to have a very definite, a compact and understandable form for presenting your information. So you can go for a table. So table is the best way. Just got rows and columns. Normally we have independent variables as rows and dependent variable as columns. But depending on the requirement, you can have even vice versa also. Absolutely no problem. Fine. Good. Please understand always there should be a independency of tables from text. Okay. So normally in Indian context, what we do is that we put one table and then we write the text. That is a normal way of presenting data in Indian culture. But what you have to understand is that both should be independent of each other. If somebody is seeing your table, they should be able to understand exactly what you are trying to display in table. So they should not go and read the text to understand table. Okay. At the same time, when you're writing something in the text should be self-explanatory. See, in order to understand what you have written in the text, people should not be directed to the table. So both should be independent of each other. They should be self-contained. Okay, fine. Then graphical. So whenever you want to show how the variable is changing, what kind of variations are available for your data. So you can make use of pictorial or diagrammatic representation, that is called graphical presentation of data. Okay. So table, it is a very simple table. The first one is a very simple table. Only one variable is there, age of the respondent, frequency, and this is relative frequency. So relative frequency is nothing but they say, for example, 33% of the students belong to 21 years. That is called relative frequency. Okay, this simple table. And here we have cross tabulation, compound tables. We say contingency tables. Contingency tables can be either 2 into 2, 2 into 3, 3 into 3, 3 into 4, 4 into 2. It can be anything. Here you see result, pass, supplement, fail. 3 rows are there. Columns BA, BCom, BSc. It's a compound table, a contingency table. It's a 3 into 3 cross table. Fine. Okay, good. In SPSS, there is something called a custom table. There you can go and generate all these kinds of contingency tables. Okay, good. We talk about graph. We have got many different kinds. We'll start from single line graph. Okay. Here we take only one variable, age of the respondents. How many are number of students on the y-axis? How many are 19 years old? How many are 20 years old? A single line graph. But when you want to represent the same age group of students who belong to 3 different universities, 3 different classes, you can go for multiple line graph. Each line talks about the age distribution of a particular institution, multiple line graph. Then comes simple pie chart. It's called a chapati chart, where the entire circle is divided into its components. Say, for example, 40% are enrolled in BA and 27% are enrolled in BCom. and 33% are enrolled in BS. So that kind of classification is possible in pie chart. Same pie chart, if you want to project which is the most or which is the least, only that particular slice alone can be popped out, can be shown separately. So that kind of pie chart is called as enhanced pie chart. Okay, you all might have used all these things. Simple bar chart, instead of a simple line, you can have one bar for every age group. 19 years old, 20 years, 21 years. For every age group, you can have a bar. The bar which is the tallest one means among our population, among our sample, most number of students are belonging to 21 or 21 years age group. Okay, this we can find out. Then you can have multiple bar chart. For example, you have three categories of students: BA students, BCom students, BA students. In one single chart, you want to show in BA how many have passed, how many have supplement exam, how many have failed. So you have three bars, multiple bars for every group of every category of variables. Okay, that kind of bar is called multiple bar chart. I think it's clear to you. Then component bar chart. So here only one bar is there. That one bar is divided into three categories. Okay, see, those who have passed, those who are having supplement, those who have failed. Single bar will represent all the three varieties of the result of a student. That is called component bar chart. Here numbers are used, number of students. When same chart is produced here, but here we have used percentage. If you take BA students, what is the percentage of students? Those who have passed. What is the percentage of students? Those who have failed. Those who have supplement examination. That is called component bar chart. That's a percentage bar chart. Okay, this also you can try. Then comes histogram. See, you have collected the data in intervals. Okay, for example, those who are aged between 20.5 to 25.5. Those who are aged between 25.5 and 30.5. When you collected the data in these kind of equal intervals, class intervals, you can draw a histogram. Okay, so you can say that this is a peakest part of the histogram. It means that most of the employees are they are 35.5 years to 40.5 years old group. That you can find out histogram. The histogram can also use to check whether the data is normally distributed or not. Okay, how can you find out? If you have a kind of a bell curve, that is the middlemost, you have got more number of observations. On both the sides of the mean, we are having less number of observations. That is called a normal data. Okay, histogram can be used. Then, so if it is same histogram, you can convert it into a frequency polygon, a graph that will show you the frequency distribution. How can you do that? Take the same histogram, you find out the middle points of each and every class interval, and you draw a line that will touch all the middle points of all the bars in the histogram. Then you get a frequency polygon. Okay, fine. Then comes OGIVE. You might have heard about OGIVE. See, whenever you are having the data in cumulative form, so you can get a cumulative data. Okay. When you want to display the cumulative frequency curve, you can go for a graph called OGIVE, O-G-I-V-E. Okay. For example, this cumulative frequency curve can be either less than cumulative frequency or more than cumulative frequency. So both these models can be used. I'll give a small example if I'm not taking your time. See, example, I have collected data from some people, 2, 10, 18, 25, 15, maybe number of appams they eat, maybe something like that. Okay. A number of push-ups they take every day in the morning, something like some data. So I have collected all these data from these many people. So when you want to form a less than cumulative frequency, I am trying to find out the less than cumulative frequency for each and every number, and that will be plotted. For example, I want to find out what is the less than cumulative frequency for number 15. Okay, how to find out? I have to check in the entire set how many numbers are equal to or less than 15 in the data set. How many are there? There are 6 numbers which are equal to or more than 15. So the less than cumulative frequency of 15 is 6. The same way, I will find out the cumulative frequency of each and every data observation. Then I can plot it in a form of a OGIF. In the case of more than cumulative frequency, instead of finding out less than or equal to, I'll find out the more than cumulative frequency of 15 is equal to the number of data points which are more than 15. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 points. Okay. That way, you will calculate more than cumulative frequency for each and every data point. That will be plotted. You will get more than cumulative frequency. Okay, fine. And finally, we have box plot. See, box plot is a very, very superb graph for giving descriptive statistics. Here, you can show 5 different descriptive statistics. Okay, if you see the figure, minimum, what is the minimum score? That is 17. You can show. What is the maximum score? 84. So 84 is the maximum score. And what is the median? 53.5. This is a median score. Then lower quartile is a 40.25. Upper quartile 65.75. 65.75. All these 5 items can be conveniently displayed in a box plot type of graphical representation. And finally, scatter plot, as I told you, whenever you want to conduct a correlation test between two variables, two numerical variables, you want to check the linear relationship between the variables, you can go for scatter plot or scatter diagrams. Here, see what is the correlation between length of metal rod at various temperatures. So very simple. So both are correlated. See, whenever length of the metal rod is increasing, the quantum of temperature, the temperature required to melt it is also increasing. So there is a positive correlation between these two variables. We can easily find out this kind of relationship in a simple graph called scatter plot. Okay, fine. So far I have showing you different methods of presenting your data. Fine. Then comes the data interpretation. It's a very complicated part of any research work where we are trying to answer only one question. So you got some results, you are answering, so what? For example, in your research study, you got one answer for a question. What is the answer? Students are not frequently using the library in the second semester. For example. So what you have to do? So what? You have to ask a question, so what? Or why? Why students are not visiting the library more often in the second semester? Because the second semester they are having more projects, more external activities, so they don't have time to come to library. So that is a kind of interpretation you give for the data. Fine. It's a very difficult part where the researcher has to apply his perceptiveness, he has to use his creativity to structure this particular part of any research work, data interpretation. Fine. A question comes here. So how can we interpret data in your research work? Please understand. See, always you should tie together. What are the two things to be tied up? Your results and another point. These two are to be tied together. You have to compare, you have to contrast the results of your study with something else. What is that something else? For example, you have done a review of literature and you have found out similar studies. You are doing a study on the internet use habits of college students. The same way, around thousands and thousands of people also might have conducted studies on internet use habits of college students. So what you can do is that one kind of interpretation is that you will compare the findings of your study with the findings of other similar studies. And you want to find out whether your findings are in line with the findings of others or your findings are against the findings of others. Okay. So that kind of comparison and contrasting. If they are together, okay, fine. If they are not same, why it is not same? A study conducted in Kerala says that some result. A study conducted in Tamil Nadu says some other result. Why there is a difference? So that kind of explanation can be given by comparing your results with that of others. Or, for example, there is a theory called technology acceptance model. What model is it? Okay. So what you do, you are checking whether the technology acceptance model is fitting into your results or not. Okay. So that kind of things. Or you can, based on the findings of your study, you will formulate a new theory, a new formula, a new model. So these are all coming under interpretation section. Fine, good. So that's about 9.5, where we discuss about various statistical issues. And 9.6, we talk about statistical packages like a spreadsheet, SPSS, BibExcel, and R statistics. Okay. So before I proceed to 9.6, and let me have some questions from the participants. If you have anything on the things we have discussed so far, please go ahead. Any question, please? No question? Or we'll have the questions at the end of the session? Okay, I'll take it that way. Okay, fine. See, we have got a lot of statistical softwares. See, statistical softwares or application softwares that can be used for analyzing your data. We have both free softwares, and we have open source softwares, and we have commercial softwares. SPS is very commercial software from IBM. Okay, now it's being run by IBM. And we have a lot of free softwares. PSPP, CoStat, StatX, OpenStat. SOFA is very good. I am using SOFA. I am using SOFA. Statistics open for all. It's a very good software you can use. Then Microstat, another software. SBAD, another software from Macquarie University. These are few softwares. Recently, we are making use of R also. Okay. MS Excel, you know very well. Everybody is using MS Excel, which has got a big worksheet with 65,000 rows and 256 columns. Okay. You can use worksheets for data entry purpose or for calculations you can use. And there's a paste function where you can paste any formula and you can apply the formula, you can get the answers. Mean, median, sum, deviations, independent sample test, high score test, all these things can be conducted. MS Excel you can also use for creating tables, all kinds of graphs. Whatever I was discussing, all those graphs can be generated using MS Excel. And apart from that, whatever results you get in MS Excel, that can be exported to, that can be taken to any of the window-based applications. You can take, whether you want to take it to MS Word, MS PowerPoint, you can carry the results of MS Excel to all those MS-based applications. See, if you go to MS Excel, there is a function called FX, insert function. That particular function, if you click, lot of options are available where you can conduct a good number of statistical methods, starting from sum, count, maximum, standard deviation. You need not know any formula. You need not type any formula. Only thing is you have to select the function and you have to select the data from which column to which row, C1 to R1, or that kind of cell range and column range you have to give. That will automatically calculate and give the answer. That is one thing. And secondly, MS Excel provides you an option for creating pivot tables. So pivot tables are those tables. So you have a column data, you have row data. You can decide which one should be in the column, which one should be in the row, and what kind of statistical measure you can follow. Whether you can have a simple frequency or a percentage or summary. Anything can be used for constructing a pivot tables in MS Excel. Fine. So if you go to MS Excel, this is a FX function called insert function. If you click it, screen comes here. You can go and choose. Hundreds of functions are there. You can go and select any one function. If you select any one function, and they will ask you what is the range. Okay, number one, number two, from one range to another. For example, I want to add all the numbers entered in A1 to A20. You select these two ranges. The statistical function, what I have selected is sum. It will give the answer. You need not by heart any formula. You need not do any kind of calculations. That will calculate and give you MS Excel. In MS Excel, if possible, you can download one extra add-on called Data Analysis Toolpack. Okay, you have to pay money for this. If even some people crack it also, if you are able to download and add this particular toolpack into your MS Excel, then you can conduct a minimum of 16 different descriptive statistics, whether mean, mode, median, range, variance, standard deviation, kurtosis and skewness, count, maximum, minimum. So all these kinds of statistics can be calculated just like that if you're having this particular toolpack called Data Analysis Toolpack. Okay, I think you know all these things. I will not tell you. And apart from that, in Excel, you can conduct one-way ANOVA, two-way ANOVA, two-way ANOVA, repeated measures, all these things, moving average method. See, when you have got numeric data over a period of 20 years, 30 years, you can calculate moving average. See, every year we'll have an average. You can take 3-year moving average, 4 years moving average. You can calculate moving average for a long period of time. And you can calculate rank. You can calculate percentile. You can do regression analysis. You can generate random numbers. See, all these things are possible in MS Excel. Okay. So you may ask me, what is percentile? Okay. If, for example, if 100 students are writing a test, the result says that you are in the 19th percentile, 90. You are in the 90th percentile. It means that your score is better than 90% of the people, those who have taken part in the test. Percentile can be calculated. So all these things can be done even in MS Excel itself. You need not have any such kind of SPS and all those things. Fine. Okay. Then SPS is very popular statistical package, which was developed by 3 Stanford University graduate students. It is an excellent tool for reporting, presenting, very, very easier and quicker way you can do the analysis, and wide range of methods are there. You can generate graphs and charts, absolutely no problem. In SPSS, data will be stored in a particular file format and output will be stored in different file format. So SPS is always having 2 different file formats. Okay, fine. SPSS is a variable view. All the variables of your study are entered here. Course, institution, gender, age, nativity, then question 1, question 2, question 3, all the variables are entered. It's a variable view. Then comes data view. You can see the actual data. Whatever data you type in, the data will be visible here. Okay, Alagappa University, gender belongs to second group, age first group. So answers you can see in the data view. And here in the analyze menu, you have all such kinds of analysis. Okay, whether you want to have descriptive statistics, click this descriptive statistics, mean, median, mode, all those things. Then custom tables, whether you want to create 2 into 3, 3 into 4, 5 into 6, any number of custom tables can be created. Then compare means, if you want to conduct a 1 sample t-test, 2 sample independent sample t-test, paired sample t-test, one-way ANOVA, you can go for compared means. Then you can go for general linear model. If you want to conduct a 2-way ANOVA, you can go for general linear model. If you want to conduct a bivariate correlation or partial correlation, you can go for correlates. Then regression, simple linear regression, multiple linear regression, logistic linear regression, all those things can be done in regression. Then classify, we have cluster analysis. Then we have dimension reduction, we have factor analysis. We have forecasting trend, and we have multiple response analysis. Sometimes you get multiple response for a question. Okay, what are the various food items you eat? So same respondent will say that I like idli, I like appam, I like puttu kadala curry. Same respondent may choose more than one response, multiple response. So all these things can be done using analyze menu. In the analyze menu, there is something called non-parametric test. I told you, Mann-Whitney test, Kruskal-Wallis, Wilcoxon. I told you, one sample case test, chi-square test. So all these non-parametric tests are found under analyze menu. There is an option called non-parametric test. Okay, that's about SPSS. Then in SPSS, you can generate all kinds of charts. Whether you want bar chart, line chart, area chart, pie chart, or box plot, or scatter plot, histogram, everything is possible in SPSS, no problem. Okay, so all these different statistical techniques and methods can be found in SPSS, which is a very, very robust top straw statistical package. Fine. Then comes BibExcel. See, those who are doing research on scientometrics or bibliometrics, you can make use of BibExcel. BibExcel is a free software which was developed by Ole Persson of Sweden. Okay, so I've been using BibExcel for the last 4 to 5 years. A very, very simple software where you can go and do frequency distribution. You can find out author-wise analysis, you can languages analysis, document type-wise analysis, citation-wise analysis. Okay, and number of citations, number of references, number of pages. All those things can be used for generating tables in BibExcel. And apart from that, even you can organize and conduct co-occurrence analysis. For example, you can do a co-citation analysis. You can do bibliographic coupling analysis, co-author analysis, co-word analysis. What are the two words that always occur together? What are the two authors who always occur together? What are the two papers which are always cited together? So that kind of co-occurrence analysis also can be conducted in BibExcel. And BibExcel, they are offering two methods of counting. One is whole count, the other is fractional count. Whole count means, for example, if a paper is written by 3 authors, every author will get 1 point. That is our whole count. If it is a fractional count, then every author will get 33.33% score. That is called a fractional counting. In BibExcel, you can have both whole count and fractional count. Both methods are possible. Not only that, whatever results you get in BibExcel, this can be exported and used in many softwares like Bajak or Excel or SPSS. Many softwares are there. Fine. And apart from that, BibExcel supports data what you have taken from Web of Science. You can download data from Web of Science. You can use or Scopus data, which is collected in RIS format, Research Information System format, that can be used. Or Medline data, PubMed data can be used. So all these data, whatever you have taken, can be used in BibExcel. Absolutely no problem. Okay, it's a robust software. This is a screen of BibExcel software, where here you can choose the file. You can select the field which is to be analyzed, and here you get the results of the analysis. Okay. See, if you take a Web of Science file, you can analyze by author field, or source field, language field, document type field, abstract field, keyword field, address field, funding field. See, all these fields can be taken one by one, and you can analyze each and every field thoroughly in BibExcel. Okay. Here you can see where you want to analyze whole field or semicolon separated field. All those things are possible in BibExcel. And you can take data from Web of Science or Diva, ProSite, Scopus, Medline, Silver Plated, Engineering Compendex. All those data can be analyzed in BibExcel. And the data analysis, the result of data analysis can be exported to other softwares like Bajak, VOS Weaver, NetDraw, UC iNet. All those softwares can be used for further analyzing the data you have got in BibExcel. Okay, fine. Then comes R statistics. In fact, initially it was written by 2 persons, Rose Ikaka and Robert Gentleman of University of Auckland. Well, it was released first in 1993. Now it has become open source software. It is being developed now by R Development Core team. See, R is a programming language and software environment where you can go and analyze the data. You can have a graphical representation of data, and you can report the data. Fine. In fact, it is a computer languaging programming. So even if you are having the data or procedures written in C, C++, .NET, Python or Fortran, all those procedures can be integrated into R language. Absolute no problem. And R is freely available under GNU, General Public License. R is available for Linux platform, Windows platform, Mac platform. And the beauty of R is that, see, R is giving you an ever expanding library of statistical and graphical techniques. So inside R, lot of libraries are there. Okay, so it all depends on you. What are the libraries you want to download and incorporate into R? That depends on your requirement. See, for example, I just show you. So this is our studio. It has got 4 compartments. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 compartments. In the bottommost compartment, you give all the comments. The right side, bottommost, you see all the libraries I have installed in my R package. For example, I have installed a special library called Bibliometrics. So whenever I want to analyze my data, I have downloaded from Web of Science or Scopus and all, I want to do bibliometric or cyanometric analysis, I need a special package called Bibliometrics. If I download and install bibliometrics in R package, then I can do all kinds of statistical analysis related to my bibliometric data. Fine. The same way for graphs, we got the Gplot. So hundreds of packages are available for R. All are free. We can download and use it. That is the biggest plus point of R software. Fine. Okay. Now you come to the last part of our presentation, 9.10, where we talk about trends in library and information science research. See, dear friends, if you take the research in library science, it was started long back in 1923 when a gentleman called Williamson, he presented a report on research in library science. In fact, he published a research paper based on his research output in the journal called Library Quarterly in 1931. Based on his 1923 report, the research in library science started flourishing. You know very well, University of Chicago is the first university in the entire world to offer to award the first PhD in library science long back in 1930. For whom? There was a researcher called Eleanor S. Upton, who did a research on a guide to sources of 17th century English history in selected reports of the Royal Commission on Historical Manuscripts. She was awarded the first PhD in library science. If you come to Europe, London, we have London School of Economics, which offered the first PhD in library science in 1935 for the title, The Public Library Service under English Local Governments. In fact, in America, in 1956, they established a firm called Council of Library Resources. See, whoever wants to do a research in library science, you can approach them. They will fund you, they will guide you, and that is how research in library science was progressing. Okay. In India, you might have heard about AIU, Association of Indian Universities. They are releasing a newsletter in that every month they talk about thesis of the month. In the whole India, whatever theses are submitted and awarded, they list it. Okay. As far as India is concerned, the first PhD in library science was awarded to Dr. T.B. Krishna Rao for his study on facet analysis and depth classification of agriculture. Okay, in 1957, it's the first PhD in library science. And if you talk about the Indians who obtained PhD in library science from foreign countries, the first one to do so is J. Sharma, who was awarded PhD for his thesis Mahatma Gandhi, a descriptive bibliography from the Michigan University. Okay, fine. And in India, the second PhD in library science, it was awarded in 1977 after a gap of 20 years. First PhD in 1957, second PhD in 1977 to Pandey S.K. Sharma for his thesis Expansion and Modification of DDC for classifying Indological books. Okay, fine. That's about history of PhD in India. Fine. So, what is the present trend of LIS research? What are the various key areas in library science that are being researched by the scholars around the globe? I have just reviewed few papers. So, there's a study which talked about the prominent areas of LIS research between 2008 and 2013. It says that survey studies were maximum during 2008 to 13. Survey studies were the maximum, followed by studies on information needs and information seeking behavior, then bibliometric cyanometric studies, then studies on library automation and ICT, then studies on use of information resources and services, then studies on library professionals, then studies on academic libraries, and goes on. They're popular topics. Then in 2016, there was a study which showcased that cyanometrics and bibliometrics have become webometrics have been the most vibrant research areas in library science, followed by research on knowledge organization, ICT applications, digital libraries, intellectual property rights, and information retrievals. Fine. And they were studying in 2018, they discovered that the areas like digital libraries, knowledge management, information technology, library services, library product marketing, library education, information literacy. These are the very popular topics in 2018. And there was another study, the research during 1980 to 2019 library science. They found out a good number of studies are from scientometrics and bibliometrics. A good number of studies on ICT and their applications in various components of libraries. And a good number of studies are talking about social media and social media networking technology library science. So these are the popular areas which are getting momentum in library science during these days. Okay, fine. So that's what my today's presentations. I think now it's a questions time. So those who would like to ask some questions on today's session, you are most welcome, please. Yes, please. You can throw your questions, please.
Sir, what is
Ramya,
coding?
please go ahead.
Sir, what is coding in data analysis?
See, for example, you have collected data from some 50 students. Okay, you are having a questionnaire. Each questionnaire is having 4 pages, and every questionnaire is having 50 questions. Okay, you collected data from 50 respondents. Now, what you can do is that you can take an Excel sheet, or you can take a plain paper. You can start putting tally marks like this. Question number 1: what is the answer of the first respondent? What is the answer second respondent? Third respondent? So you'll keep on writing the answer 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So you will write the answer like that. No, that is called coding of responses. The responses given by the respondents are converted into some kind of codings. Some people, what they do, know, they'll put tally mark. How many people have told first choice, second choice, third choice, 1, 2, 3, 4, tally mark. No, even that is a kind of coding. But recently, after the use of SPSS and all, what you can do is you can directly go to SPSS. We start entering data. Okay. So previously we had some kind of coding techniques. Fine. That's clear.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next question, please. Neetu, any question? Ramya, any question? Anju, any question? Ramya, in some no. No question. Okay. Anju, any question? Anju? No question, Anju? Okay. Okay. I think people are leaving. Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful session on statistical analysis. Maybe day after tomorrow, we are meeting again for the next and the final session on research methodology. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.